This morning we're going to be in Exodus, and we're going to be kind of in this section of Exodus chapter 13 through 15. When I thought about Herb and Bobby, I wondered, when I saw that picture, I wondered about their wedding. And maybe they can share this with me at a later date, but I wonder what their song is. You ever heard that? Like, what's your song? Or, like, as if couples are supposed to have songs. Terry and I really love each other. We have lots of songs. That's a different time and day. Funeral yesterday, and it was such a sweet funeral, and the Kirkpatricks and their family here this morning. So we're just praying for you, and we're just so blessed and honored. And we are praying in this season of mourning with you, and we are, as a church, if we can minister and help in any way, let us know. One of the things that I got from Jana's dad is he loves music. Is that right? And I heard a number of like 9,000, is that right, records of music, which is just crazy to me. But it just showed his love for music and his passion for music. And music does that, doesn't it? Music somehow stirs the heart and soul of people. Let's look at some music clips here and see what you think. So let's get our first one up.
A long, long time ago, I can still remember how that music used to make me smile.
All right, stop it. You remember that song? I know some of you wanted to keep going, but that is The Day the Music Died. Now we're singing, right? And so that was a song that depicted what? It was the song about a plane wreck of Buddy Holly and Ritchie Valens and the Big Bopper. And music didn't really die that day, though it's a beautiful song about the value and richness of music. I'm probably not the person to talk about music today. I think there's others in here. I know the Simmons and others have their life surrounded with music, but music isn't just exciting. It doesn't just fill our souls. Music also has an important place and piece in culture. Next one. Stop. I know. And that's Motown, right? And Motown in its history and its story had this place where it transformed culture because its meaning, its significance, and what it was about people and their struggle during a time where maybe for some of them they because based on their skin and color and everything else that they fought, and so this was a way for them to express themselves, to gain a stage and a voice. And then history has a place of music too. Music is beautiful, and it somehow provides a multitude of instruments and pieces and voices. Next one. What a beautiful symphony. That's good. Is that number 13? Is that right? Is that Mozart? I could have picked a lot better one. See what I'm saying? And music does that, right? The irony is music touches at our soul. We hear a song and it hits us. Have you have heard songs at funerals, and then maybe weeks or months or even years later you hear that song and it takes you back to that funeral? Maybe that was the song sung at your mom and dad's or that loved one. And so it hits you. And the music also finds its way in pop culture. Next one. All right, stop. Save the best for last, right? For all you Star Wars junkies. Music in its form somehow connects and engages and impacts in so many ways. And so this morning, This morning we spend our time on Exodus chapter 15 because it is a powerful song that has somehow survived its meaning and survived its message throughout ages. In the great Exodus song of 15, it reflects Israel's dependence on God's salvation. That their salvation is built upon God and God alone. Okay, in order for us to figure that out, to figure how big and grand and wonderful that song is, you have to go back to Exodus chapter 13. And in Exodus chapter 13, the people are about to leave. And as they're leaving, they're getting all their stuff ready, right? They've got their possessions. They've got everything figured out. They have finally gotten the okay and the go from Pharaoh. They're in this season of hurry up. They need to get going because they have no idea how their followers or their pursuers are going to proceed, if they're going to let them go, if they're going to chase them, which we know happens. And so they're struggling at the very end of 17 or chapter 13, verses 17. You have this section of the pillars of cloud and fire. Guide me, O thou great Jehovah. Let the fire and cloudy pillar lead me. But this is an interesting section. Guide me, God, guide me. But listen to the passage. When Pharaoh let the people go, verses 17, God did not lead them by the way of the land of the Philistines, although that was what? That was the better option. It was nearer. It seemed to make sense to normal people. That's the route that we're supposed to go, God. We're going to go this way. What? I mean, I'm buying into this God thing, but surely this God thing is supposed to be the simple and fast route. And then it says this: if the people face war, they may change their minds and return to Egypt. So there's a reason for this. So God led the people by the roundabout way of the wilderness toward the Red Sea. The roundabout way. Okay, I'm going to pick on Jason Anderson for just a second. Sorry, Jason. This is just for illustration. So a couple weeks ago, we were in Dallas, Texas. Justin's laughing because he knows what I'm going to bring up. And it was late that night. Me and the Isaacs just drove early in the morning when it was solid raining. I was just worn out, and I was ready to get back to the hotel room. So I had two choices. I could either just put the address into my Google phone app, right? If you use one of those where it talks to you. Or I could choose Jason Anderson as my guide. Guide me, oh great Jason Anderson. I chose Jason Anderson. Now, to be fair to Jason Anderson, he might have been using the same Google satellite as I was, because as you know, with lots of major cities, as you're driving down the road and you hit like a place where there's lots of freeway and roads, you're trying to, in the very last second, figure out what is your satellite saying for you to do. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, I see a right here, but there's 4 rights. Which right is my right? And so oftentimes, at the very last second, you might go, oh, I'm supposed to be this far right. Well, Jason, he made a few mistakes that night. And we had about 3 or 4 U-turns, and by the time we had to drive through, I don't even know what type of parking lots to finally find our way to the hotel. Now that seems crazy, getting lost on a road. And to be fair to Jason, we've all been there. But the truth of the matter is, when you are following God, sometimes you just don't know where you're going. And that's really hard for us, because we got to know everything. I got to know where I'm going. I got to have everything figured out. I got to know where we're heading, church. Because if I don't know where we're heading, that's gonna upset me. And I got to know in my life where I'm supposed to be next year. And I got to know that whatever this health ailment or whatever this battle is doing, that I know that in 6 months or 3 months or maybe sooner that I'm going to be better. I know where I'm going. Because I know where I'm going, and this is an actual oxymoron. I know where I'm going because I trust God. And guess what? When you trust God, sometimes you just don't know where you're going. And that's hard. Because if you're like me, I put everything ready to go to make sure that wherever I'm going, I'm ready. I know what it's going to look like. I'm prepared. But sometimes that's just not the case. And the reason why this is so true is because if you go back to the previous Exodus, there are two main characters. One that just kind of goes with the flow. He just kind of follows what God's will is. The other one makes conditions and says, I will believe in you if you do this, or I will believe in you if you do this. And I hate to say this, but the one who makes the conditions early on in Exodus is the bad guy. And the one who is open to what God has in store for his life is the good guy. And Pharaoh made so many conditions, and he continues to make conditions. And finally, he's had enough. The Israelites, if you read the story, they almost look so vulnerable and weak. They got lots of stuff on them. They're a large nation of people. They got good amount of money. They've got gold and silver and other things maybe given to them from their ex-slave masters. They're vulnerable because they have men, but they also have women and children. Physically speaking, they're probably not as healthy as the Egyptians are, because it sounds like they probably were not fed properly. So in all said, they're just kind of this weak, vulnerable party. And God is smart. He creates their vulnerability as an opportunity. He creates this illusion that the Israelites are wandering aimlessly. That's the term used. And so it's really hard to know that God is in control at this point. Because we really, if we've never read this story before, we have no idea what comes next. You just have to put your trust in God. And so the people, they make their way across the desert. And they know the enemy is gaining on them. And the enemy is gaining and gaining and gaining. And then you get over this last horizon, and there in front of you is what? A large body of water. And I don't know about you, but in my mind and how I work and how I need to make sure I know where I'm going and I got everything figured out, that in that moment, all the control I thought I had in that situation and all the plans that I thought I had in that situation, they just begin to completely unravel. Because I have really two choices. I can either swim very far, or as the dust settles and this massive army appears behind me, or I could die. My two choices are death or death. And then God somehow moves in ways when you feel like you're stuck at death. God has always cheated death. And so you're stuck. You have no idea where you're going. You might have missed it early on in the video clip, but Jamie makes a comment that she felt like she was stuck at this train station. And she didn't know when she was going to get on. And she was, in her own life, feeling unraveled. because she knew that God had something in store for her, but she had no idea what that was. And she was lost. And she probably many nights cried out and wondered what was going on. She herself had found the desert. And God's journey was so roundabout, she had no idea what God was up to in her life. And then God shows up. And God shows up in dramatic form. This great, massive body of water is split open. And just on that other side, just over there, there is salvation. There is redemption. There is a new life with God. And I just have to push my way through. And I'm not doing this on alone because there are so many people, so many kids and adults, slave and free, from multitude of places who are all around me. And we actually have kind of the same story. I mean, we're very different, but our story is the same, where we feel so stuck. And yet God shows up in dramatic form, and the seas open. And they trust God. They trust God. And they walk through. And they get to the other side. And guess what? It's still desert. It's still wilderness. But when they look behind them, that life behind, and the dictatorship, and the oppressiveness, and the pain, and all of the messiness that controlled their life before, went crashing down. And God freed them. And what do they do next? They play music. The Song of Moses in Exodus chapter 15 is a song that reminds their own people of what God is up to. You can pick this song apart. Then Moses and the Israelites sang this song to the Lord. I will sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. Horse and rider he has thrown into the sea. The Lord is my strength and my might. God has become my salvation. Who is like you, O Lord, among the gods? Who is like you, majestic in holiness, awesome in splendor and doing wonders? You stretched out your right hand, and the earth swallowed them. In your steadfast love, you led the people whom you redeemed. You guided them by your strength to your holy abode. And the peoples heard and they trembled. The pangs seized, and the inhabitants of Philistia and the chiefs of Edom were dismayed. Trembling seized the leaders of Moab. All the inhabitants of Canaan melted away. Terror and dread fell upon them by the might of your hand. By the might of your hand. They will become as a stone until your people, O Lord, passed by. You brought them in and planted them on the mountain of your own possessions, the place, O Lord, that you made your abode, the sanctuary, O Lord, that your hands have established. And the Lord will reign forever and ever. Amen. This is a song that will never die. This is music to our ears. I mean, there's a lot of good music out there. and there's some music that's not. We have wonderful church music that has shaped us, and the hymns we sang this morning capture the wonderful image of who God is. And so today and moving forward, we continue to sing that song. The song that God is trusted with our salvation, and that God will restore us, and that God will redeem us. Today we sing and rejoice that God has rescued us. God, the great deliverer. You might feel stuck. You might feel stuck. But through God, I assure you, that train shows up. And God takes you with all of your baggage. And God will lead you through the salvation of God's glory. This morning, it's such an easy invitation, because this message itself speaks upon that invitation, which is God receives you in your past, but moves you to a future of redemption. That if you open yourself up to God, that's hard, right? Because one of the hardest things for followers is sometimes we just don't need to know where we're going. And so we have to have confidence and faith that God is going to lead us in wonderful ways.